Yeah, welcome everybody to the Touchdesigner Roundtable Berlin, this time online, all over the globe. I'm very happy for all the viewers that are there. We're gonna improvise a little bit today, so we have a few nice guests here. I'm gonna talk with them here in this video chat. And the stream is gonna go out to YouTube and to Twitch, and there will be Carlos and Wieland in the chats, and they will take your questions if you have questions to the presenters, and then in the question round after the presentation they will read your questions to us here in the video chat. What else do I have to announce? Yeah, we have great speakers. We will start with Tom Kombuechen from Cables. Cables is a fairly new patching software that runs completely in the browser, which is exciting for nodeheads like us. Then we will meet with Robert Seidel, who is an artist very dedicated to very abstract films, which is a rarity these days, so we're very curious what he tells us. Then we're gonna talk to Davide Santini. Some of you might know him because he has actually written a book about touch designer shortcuts, which is available on Amazon. And last but not least, we're gonna meet with Markus Heckmann, live from Toronto, who's gonna tell us the newest chit-chat from the Derivative headquarters. But now let me please welcome our first guest. Let's do some switching. Yes, our first guest is going to be Thomas Kombuechen, the inventor, founder and main developer of Cables.gl. Hello Thomas, how are you doing?
Hi Stefan, hi.
Yeah, I'm very glad that this worked out because it was before the crisis, almost before the crisis, when I went to a Cables.gl user meeting because I was curious to meet the people behind that software. So, Tom, since when are you working on Cables?
We started working on it in 2015. We had closed beta for a long time, and last year we opened the beta, so it's still in beta, but now everyone can just register and use it and experiment with it, and yeah.
Sounds great. I found it very convincing because it has a very clean interface. So
thank you.
Obviously something that is an advantage when you start new with the software, but from what I understand, for the most part, you used it for your own project, so this is actually battle-proven software.
Yeah, more or less. No, it's still kind of beta, but yeah, we use it. We are financing it basically with like projects that we realize with agencies or with clients, and we since the first after 3 months we used it for our own projects. And yeah, that was always one of the most important things, that it's always usable for projects and creating websites with it, basically.
Mm-hmm. I just see that I just cover up your face with my graphics. Yeah, I'll remove that in a second. Yeah, well, I scheduled your talk for 2015 for I don't know what kind of things that I thought that I'm gonna say in these first 15 minutes. I think we just jump right to your talk if you're ready.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Then I will be out, right? And you have. Yeah. You're
okay.
on. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. This is also the first time I stream in my life, so let's see how it works. Yeah, so I'm Tom. My nickname is Pandur. I started Cables basically, and I started basically 2015, and now we are a team of 5 people developing it. And yeah, I want to show you what Cables is about. So, like Touchdesigner, it is a graphical development environment. So you can you build a project out of little nodes, out of little operators, we call them. And this is all in the browser with Cables, and it's using all web technologies, mainly WebGL, but also you can also build HTML, and also it always should be able to run on the browser. So everything we, on the mobile phone browser. So everything we do, we also try to make it most compatible so it works also on a mobile device. So yeah, so what you see here is the Cables.gl website when you're logged in. So the address is just Cables.gl. And this is also what we call the community part of Cables, because when you scroll down, so this is our news area. When you scroll down, you can see patches that other people did. Click them and look at them. And from here, you can also, so this is our little virus jam we did in the last weeks, and this is one of the submissions. And when people publish stuff on Cables, you can always just open it in the editor. It's just one click of that button, and then you have the patch open in your browser, and you can play around with it and do experiments with it. But more about the editor later. Just want to show like that everything you see here, you can just open it and look at it and experiment with it, and also copy it and clone it and remake. It's all available in the editor when it's published. But you don't have to publish your projects. You can just use them privately. So yeah, here you see the community part. You see the latest patches and also the top patches, like stuff that was done longer ago, but you can still see it and like it, and then it appears in the top patches. So that's basically the community part. Then we have a lot of learning material and documentations here. You can see a list of all ops, and when you click them, you see a little example page. I will show this more in detail later. Then we also have a huge YouTube library of tutorials, which is very important to us. And this is the best learning resource for new users. You can just go here and you have hundreds of videos that you can listen to and learn from it. And all of those videos are done by Mark, which is a native English speaker, so it's much more pleasant to listen to him than listen to me. So don't be afraid, watch those videos when you want to learn it. Yeah, then there's another page which is called Made with Cables, and here you can see commercial projects or artsy projects that we did, that we realized with Cables. We will update this website in the next days, but yeah, here you can see a lot of commercial projects and like real world projects that were done with Cables. Yeah. So that is our website basically. Just open the editor in the browser, and I will do that now and create a new project from scratch, and I will just show you how to patch with Cables. So this is the Cables patch editor basically. What you see here is like the patch field where we can add operators, and this is our rendering output parameters. So we'll just create some operators. For WebGL stuff, the main loop op is the most important one, because this one just triggers the rendering every frame, like in a game. It will just update this image here as often as it is possible. And so now I connected a circle operator to the main loop. And on the right side, I have now parameters for the currently selected ops. So I can adjust the parameters of the circle up here, and I see the output directly in the renderer. So now I created this circle operator. I can click here and create another operator, for example, transform. With this one, I can move around the circle, so everything that comes below the transform operator can now be transformed. So I can scale it and move it left and right, and I can also rotate it. And you already see this is already happening in 3D. So everything, basically everything in Cables works in 3D out of the box. And I can now add a material to colorize the circlet that I have here. And I can just adjust the color and see the circle is colorized. So we have a lot of materials. I will show some of them later. Yeah, so now I can also remove those nodes here. For example, I can shake them to remove them, or I can drag them and put them in here in the middle again, and then it's connected again. And another nice op I want to show is the random cluster. This one basically draws the circle 100 times now, and draws it and transforms it to a random position. So you see now 100 circles. One interesting thing about Cables, or what we use to debug patches a lot, is the so-called flow mode. So when I enable this by pressing F, you see the direction of things. So you see the main material, and this triggers the transform, this triggers the random cluster. And there's much more traffic here. This means like the random cluster executes the circles a lot of times, like 100 times right now. So you can read that there is a lot of activity here. So you can debug this easily. So when I disconnect something here, you see it stops being active. And this is a really handy thing for debugging things. So you can also do operators that control the flow, like if true execution op, and so on. Yeah, so a circle is quite boring. So I want to create something more interesting. For example, a cube. And a cube is a 3D object, but this looks really flat here. So our material is not showing the 3D part, basically. So, for example, we have a 3D shaded material like Lambert material. So when I turn this up, you see there are cubes in, and I can move them around with the transform op. And I see that those cubes are already in 3D. So I transformed this scene with the transform op, but there are a few camera ops in Cables. So one of them is called orbit controls. And when I add this operator here, I can just drag the mouse and move around in the 3D scene that we built with the random cluster, and I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and you can basically see, you can explore the whole scene, basically. So now I do this interactively, but maybe I want to add, like, animate things here. So I can, for example, create a timer. So this operator outputs the current time since I created this operator. So the operators always work like this. In the top, you have the parameters that we already adjusted here, and on the bottom, you have the outputs. So this timer just outputs a time. You can see it here. It's just a growing number. So, for example, I can connect this timer to the rotation, and you see now all the cubes are rotating, basically. And I can make it faster, for example, and you see it rotating. So if we want to animate like each cube individually, we can just create a transform behind the transform, the random cluster. So then we transform each cube after the random cluster, basically. So when I connect this here, you see each of the cubes is rotating in a different direction because of the random rotation that the random cluster creates. Yeah, so the random cluster also has a lot of options, so you can adjust the area where this where the random things are positioned, and you can just see this and adjust this on the fly. Yeah, also you can always click the view documentation button here. So this is a really good trick to learn cables. So you just open example patches from other users and you just explore what ops they use. So for example, I want to know more about the random cluster. I just click here, view documentation, and you see a new tab opens in your browser, and then you see an example patch here. So I can again now open this editor of this patch in this tab. So I can have tons of editors open at the same time, basically. And you can just go here and play around with it and look at all the ops that are used here. Experimenting in the other tab, you can just go here and Control C or Command C this and go over here and just paste it in here, and then you can connect it, and then you have those cubes also in here. So you can just copy paste stuff from other patches over to your patches, and you can just go wild by stealing stuff, basically, by just copying stuff. Yeah. So when you build, when you finished with your awesome patch, then you can always export your patch. So Cables is not like YouTube. It's not like a thing in the. I mean, it is a thing in the cloud. The editor is only available on Cables.gl and not offline right now. But maybe that changes in the future. But to embed it in your own website, you can just export it, and you just click here, export, exporting patch, and then you download a zip file. Wait, like this. So now I exported a zip file, and I hope you can see this. It contains an HTML file and some JavaScript files. So those files are really static files. You can just upload them to your web server and embed them in your website. So when I open this index.html, in many cases this doesn't work, but in this example, this just works. Yeah. So you can also open this in an editor, and then you just see this is all the code that display this this patch. So you can just embed this in your website, basically. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is how you can use this in your own website. Yeah, so maybe some more nice ops. For example, if I also find the cube too boring, I can also add 3D files. So one example would be this head 3D file. So this is our file manager, and there are a few example files which I will just show you. So I drag the head from the example file library, and I can just export, connect this head 3D file, And now you see the cube is a 3D object which I imported. And this is a really simple example, but for example, we can now load GLTF files, and they can also be animated. Like this example here, really nice one. Not from us, the animation, but from someone else. But you see, you can import complex animations into Cables, and the patch is still really simple. And you can do a lot of stuff with it. We have new video tutorials about this, and there are a few coming soon. You can access each mesh in that 3D file and do stuff with it, but I will not show this now. Yeah, I could also go and use text operator. So, for example, text mesh, and I can just type in text here, and you see we have this text in 3D now, yeah, that is also working. Another interesting feature is that you can write your own operators. Like those operators here, you can basically just go in there and view the code from those ops. And you can learn from this code also, and you can clone this code in Cables. And you can just go here, code a new op, click this. I would just create one. And now I can enter the code for this op. So when I search for it, you see I have a user op here now, and I can just create it. And you see we have this meetup op, which doesn't even have inputs and everything, but we can just do this. Just a really quick example. So when nice, sorry. So I crashed it actually. So let me reload this patch. And now, usually, like if you don't crash it, then it should work. So you see now our op has an input port, which I can change. And we have a few video tutorials about how to code ops and how to change them. Please look at the videos if you want to code in Cables, but this is one way of coding. You can also edit shaders, like in Shader Toy or something. There's an op custom shader, for example, where you can code shader code. Yeah, so main work with WebGL. So what I just showed you is all WebGL, the 3D API in your browser. But you can also do a few other things with Cables. For example, you can build HTML stuff in Cables too. I wouldn't recommend writing whole websites in Cables because that's somehow not the thing that it was made for. And we all learned from the Adobe Flash days. So I wouldn't recommend this. But for some stuff, like if you want to just display some text or something, it's just super handy to write, to make a div element, an HTML element. And the blue one you see here, this is a HTML element. And it's just attached to this corner of this cube using this transform element op. And this is actually our div element operator. So I can just type in text here and it will just update the HTML. And so the blue color and the white border and everything, this is coming from CSS. So we can just edit CSS in here and change the look of this thing and just change it. Yeah, so this is how you can also do HTML stuff in Cables. Then we have a few, sorry about that. We have a few ops for audio too. So for example, this is a FFT op. Yeah, probably you cannot hear the sound now, but you see the sound. And you can just change which area of the sound frequency you want to grab, and you can just connect this to other operators and see and basically make the sound visual. that you can see it. And this you can also open and copy this over, just change the MP3, and then you can do your own music visualizations, basically. One cool thing in Chrome is that you can also access MIDI devices. So, for example, this is a MIDI device, and I can just change values with this MIDI controller. So let me enable the flow mode. Now you see the flow of the data that it's coming from the MIDI operator. And this is super handy. We do like VJ shows in Cables with the MIDI controller. Super handy thing. Only works in Chrome, but it's really cool. Yeah, this is basically what I wanted to show today. I don't know how fast I was. Probably I was super fast.
Yeah, not too fast.
Huh?
Not too fast, I would
Okay,
say.
good.
I understood. Very interesting. Before we switch to the audience, I have like 1 or 2 questions that I want to ask you,
please.
if you allow me. So I was wondering, what is the main application of Cables, right? Because touch designers, usually they go out in the world, they do brick projections, they do installations and so on. Is that also your aim, or are you strictly aiming at in-browser experience?
Basically, like everything visual is the goal. So I created this to create demos. I don't know if you know the demo scene, which is like a community for creating real-time animations, basically, and compete against each other. So this was always my hobby, like a long time ago already. And then WebGL came to the browser, and I was like, yeah, I can now combine my hobby with my job, which was a web developer at that time. So I could combine those two things I really love and create Cables. So basically, it's and then we started using this professionally. So a lot of clients came and asked about WebGL, little WebGL apps, microsites or experiences or bigger sites, and then we started doing them in Cables. And nowadays we do this like full time, creating stuff with Cables, basically.
Do you have an example of what would be like the most exciting customer thing that you did and that you're actually allowed to talk about?
Yeah, sure. I can show an example. So, for example, this website we did with Onformative, an agency from Berlin, and with the artist called Refik Anadol. And we made a visualization of public data around Los Angeles. And you can just zoom in this world here, and you see this is Los Angeles. And this is a good example of what you can do. And those data that is displayed here is like current data, like in the last 48 hours, you see tectonic activities or like little earthquakes, basically. It's not as dramatic as it looks, but those are real, like there was a recorded activity. And we collect this data and then we display it with Cables. And for example, those little blue lines that are flying around here, those are tweets. So so the blue dots are tweets. And when people address each other with the @ sign, then you see this blue line going around. So usually there's much more activity. This is probably because of the Corona situation right now. Usually you have way more distribution of points. It's very interesting. I just realized that. But yeah, so we have 2 recorded geolocations basically, and then we draw this line. And when you open this on your mobile phone, you see an abstract view of this. You see this abstract view basically, and you can use your phone gyroscope sensors to look around this scene. So yeah, this is a nice example of the project that we love to do, basically. Yeah.
And it looks amazing. I mean, I've seen it on the website, and without the artifacts from the streaming, it looks even a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. Just go to that website. It's just online accessible. Yeah.
Well, so obviously you have an easy time to connect to all kind of data sources. Can you also connect to Arduinos and this kind of stuff?
So it's actually not that easy. Basically, so we are a bit restricted what we can do because of the browser, because there are a lot of security restrictions, and this we can open a website or a JSON file and read data from there, or we can do WebSockets, which is a more real-time communication protocol. And so an Arduino can stream that. I'm pretty sure you can make like a minimal web server on it and open this, and then you could access this. Also, there are MQTT wrappers that probably if you talk about Arduino, maybe you know MQTT already. It's a protocol for real-time communication for those little embedded devices. So there is software to convert this MQTT data to WebSockets, so then you can access it again in the browser. So yeah, it's a bit more complicated than with the native program, but it is possible.
Yeah, and it's probably always networked, so it can always go from. It's not locked to a certain position in a way, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to say so, yeah.
Okay, so I think maybe it's time now to open questions for the community. So I'll get Wieland and Carlos in and see what they what questions they've got from the audience.
Great. Yeah, and also I think in the announcement we said that we wanted to show how to connect cables with Touchdesigner. Yeah, sadly we couldn't do this because we are total Touchdesigner noobs. But I think we, like you and me, Stefan and Mark, we will meet and do this, and then maybe have a nice solutions to show how to connect those two programs.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into it and I've seen already that WebSockets would probably be the way, but I'm not good enough for that. Maybe Wieland will have a look in the future. I think he's pretty fit with web things. So guys, what's going on in the chat? Do we have...
so lots of praise coming here from YouTube right now. So there's some stuff like looks awesome, walk cool with a heart emoji, and Cables looks cool. And we actually got two questions. The first one is by, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it right, it's Vibeke Bertelsen. And the question is, will cables always be free of charge?
That is our plan, yes. I believe it doesn't make sense to ask for money for this. We will probably make a pro version where you have like more disk space on our servers and stuff like this. But the basic version, like everything I showed, this should always be free. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the answer. So the second question is from Peter Kearney, and the question, the question is, he knows that there is a custom shader operator since ISF is on their brain today. Curious if it is possible to support ISF with a GLSL hook.
Not yet, no. It's asked a lot, and we want to do this all the time, but we never came to really do it. But if you understand, like if you have a rough understanding of GLSL code, then you can convert it by hand. It's really not that complicated to do, actually.
And thanks for this answer. And that's all the questions from YouTube from now. So I'm giving over to Twitch.
So here they say, is it necessary to upload all the assets like textures and 3D objects?
Yes, right now it is. This is a must. Access files from so no, not actually not, but it's way easier. But you could also host them on your own server and access them from Cables. but in most cases that doesn't really make sense. But you could, if you have like a dynamic images from one server, you could load them and use them in Cables, so you don't really have to upload them. But in most cases, it makes much more sense to upload them and then later export them and use the whole thing on your server. So you only upload them to work with them on Cables, and later they don't need to be hosted on Cables. So it's a bit confusing, but you get your files back basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. And there's another question. Is it possible to have an external screen output for performance?
Maybe. So when you, for example, want to make an installation or you want to make a video show, you build your patch. Basically, you don't really want to patch in a VJ performance because you performance when this is a bigger patch. So you can export this and run this offline without the editor. We have a project on GitHub, which is an Electron build, which is basically a browser without the UI. So you can just make it full screen, and scratch it over multiple screens, or just make it full screen on your second screen. So yes, in this way, this is possible. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for Twitch. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So
coming
that's,
in from YouTube here. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
The question is by Da Shu. I hope that's correct. And the question is, do he has to be online patch?
Yeah, currently this is the case. Yeah, so currently you have to be online. We try to change this. We are experimenting with technologies to make it offline, but right now and for the near future, this is the only way you can use it. Yeah.
And here's a new one in Twitch. Is there any possibility to record directly MP4 or a node to do it externally?
Yeah. You can. There's an op called render anim, and you cannot render an MP4, but you can render images, like an image sequence, and then you can convert it on your computer to an.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm wondering, like, what was the most complicated patch you ever built with Cables? And then do you kind of have a way to make sub patches to kind of keep the overview?
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, you would go crazy. You can just mark some operators and click here to create a sub patch, and then you can go in here, and then you can scroll around, and you can go back, and it's more. You can create a visual structure of your patch basically, and it's also faster and easier to find things. The most complicated patch, it's really hard to say. We are currently working on some where we have like 2,000 operators or something. So yeah, it can get really huge. I guess you know this. Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, have many people already adapted that for their work as their main program? I mean, users who are not working with your company?
Yeah, for sure. So also on this page, you see stuff that is not real, that wasn't done by us, project that other people did. So they are not that many, but it's growing, I would say. Yeah, we have a few thousand users now, like nearly 10,000 users, and there are people that are using this for jobs. Yeah, and you can just use it for jobs, for commercial projects. There is no you don't have to pay us if you use it for a commercial project or something. That's also a question that is asked often. You can just use it for the jobs you want.
Does that even include free support?
You can pay us for support if you want. That's no problem. No, so yeah, we try to answer questions in the forum all the time. So we have a forum here. I didn't show it, I think. There you can ask questions. So we try to do this every few days. It's getting a bit more right now. So, but we are really happy to do a workshop in your company or in your agency or something, and give you a training, for example. That's something we are really interested to do.
So, do we have any more questions from the community coming in?
There's one more here in Twitch. Is here AR stuff?
Web AR means augmented reality, I guess. So there's this Web XR API, which we can do virtual reality right now in Cables. This is very experimental still. There is augmented reality coming right now to the web. It's still really the early days, and there's, I think, a beta version of on Android, but we don't have this right now. But we used another external library for an AR project, but we are really waiting on the official API that it becomes more stable and more multi-platform, and then we will integrate it for sure. This is a really interesting topic for us, but it's not there yet for us.
And there's a new one that say, is it possible to have a client layout mode accessible by other users only for visualization or data entry, for example?
Good question. No, there isn't. So you can invite people to your patch. So you can so multiple people can work on it. You cannot do this at the same time right now. But if you invite someone, this person can change everything basically. So right now this is not possible. But this is also a thing that we think a lot because as a developer, basically, we always have this situation that the client says, yeah, make it a bit more red or make it a bit more blue, and then you change the settings. And we try to do this like sitting next to each other and adjusting all the stuff next to each other or over a web screen share, but you cannot really do that. What we do, so what we often do is you can create sidebars in Cables. So you can create a control for this, and then you can just put the most important parameters there, and then send it to the client. And we build really complex things with this sidebar, and then we send it to the client and say like, yeah, tell us like the value that you want to see in our app, and then he sends us those values, and this is a good way to communicate with the client. Yeah, I hope that was the question. Yeah.
So one question coming from me, if it's possible, Stefan.
Certainly.
Perfect. Is it possible to kind of, maybe it is the question before, but is it possible to use other projects or export projects for import in other projects? So basically merging them in sub-patches like you created?
I don't know exactly what you mean. So what we do, so often we work with external developers, and so there's a website, and we only build the cables part, so the 3D part or something, and then their developers embed this in their HTML. But I'm not sure if that was your question.
The question was more about patch functionality you showed before. So taking operators and collapsing them into a smaller, like just one node. Is it possible to export and import these sub-patches?
Yeah, okay. So currently you can copy and paste them, basically. there we are planning that you have like we want to call it a blueprint library where you have we can basically build your own ops. I mean, we saw it, you already have this op there, but this is currently just a visual thing. So we want that's one of our big to-dos on the list, that you can save this and have a list with the screenshot and the description, then you can reuse it in your other projects. But that's currently not possible. Currently, you copy paste this subpatch or you code an op basically, but that's on our list. Yeah.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. I think the time is up.
Yeah, thank you.
It was great to have you here. Thank you for coming over. It's sad that you couldn't come over in person with your whole body, and we could have like a beer together, and you could meet
we
the
will
community.
do that after all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we will have to do lots of beers after this, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. I'm going to move you
thanks for having me.
To the audience as much as you guys. Thank you for bringing in the community. I appreciate it. The next thing we are going to look at is an intermezzo. It's like an audiovisual piece. The visuals are by Robert Seidel, which is going to be our next guest. And yeah, we're gonna ask Robert about this film afterwards. Film up. So, Robert, thank you very much for this nice video. I'm gonna turn on your audio, and I hope your video as well, and I hope we can see you now soon. Yeah, this is always a bit difficult with this conferencing software that we're using, that we're trying at the moment. That Robert is in the chat, but I can't see and I can hear him. The thing that usually helps is waiting a little bit, so that's basically what we're gonna do. Yeah, he just says he has problems with the connection, so he's going to reconnect. Maybe a fun story, basically, sorry for this. Basically, Robert and myself and another guest that we're going to see this evening, we all studied at the Bauhaus University in Weimar, so it's almost like a alumni meeting here. Hi, Robert.
Hi.
Oh, I can hear you, I can see you, that's great. So welcome to the Touchdesigner Roundtable meeting. I already said that you are an artist working with abstract movies, which is quite rare, and I imagine not so easy to make a name for oneself in a world that's obsessed by looking at movies where people do stuff to people.
Doing stuff to people, yes. Yeah, I think that's also the reason why in recent years I've been doing kind of installations and projections. So my original kind of idea of creating something has changed a bit, and thanks to the last thanks to the last months, it's changing again, I guess.
You mean back from the real world into the virtual?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a strange moment in time, I guess.
So is it. Well, but we're happy that you could make it virtually. And well, I would be very curious for your presentation. Should we try to turn on the screen share and see if that's working?
Sure. The one thing I wanted to note, because my screen share stuff is kind of yes, still it's only for performance reason. Most of the things can be found on my Vimeo, so people can bookmark stuff or whatever.
Yeah, I posted the links in the Facebook event. I think
Okay.
also somehow in the other chats they're gonna find.
I will try to do the screen share thing. This could be it. We are waiting for the fancy feedback. Okay.
There we go.
We have the feedback. That's nice.
Yeah,
And,
cool.
I don't know if I'm still visible.
Yeah,
see
you will
myself.
be visible as a small icon in the right corner, but the
Okay.
presentation is gonna run full screen as it already does.
Okay.
So I'm gonna turn myself on and have fun.
Thank you. Also feel free to stop me if I get too long or too boring or whatever. So as Stefan noted, I studied at the Bauhaus like him and Markus, our later guest as well. And I started out doing drawings in the beginning, which is kind of still an important part of my practice, which is a bit, I would say strange in the sense that everything is happening digitally and I still like to draw with ink or pen. So these are often the beginnings of the works I'm doing, and going abroad for a semester, I started doing experimental films, because the process of my drawings is always very much coming alive or fading away. So films naturally were a direction to go. So as said before, you can view these films, which I usually show in a screening situation. So feel free to check them out on Vimeo. So I've been doing stuff in 2D and 3D using different software, but always with the goal to create something that is not really in a look of a specific software or specific technology. So things are often very organic and they oscillate between very black and white works and works that are very colorful. Some people think it's too colorful, but I like it the way it is. And my process in working with these or on these projects is trying to create a certain mood, trying to find specific moments that are inspired by a drawing or something that turns into a film in the beginning. And the film itself is always just one iteration of the outcome, because starting with film presentations in cinema, now I'm at the point of doing installations for some years, like multi-channel projections in gallery spaces, but also doing large-scale works on buildings. So this is kind of something that I would say is that has opened a lot of possibilities to travel and to see the world. And now with my last project, it's kind of, it seems to be over for quite some time. And I'm still not very decided how to deal with that, because the tradition of experimental film in Germany is there have been important filmmakers, but the funding situation and presentation situation isn't that exciting beyond museums and festivals. So this is, for example, the project that was cancelled 2 weeks ago on the day of the opening. So it never happened, which is still a quite strange feeling of a project that has been in preparation for months. So but I'm also not only doing kind of these larger projections, but also projection on sculptures that I create. So we have these paper sculptures I did. We have sculptures made from different kind of foils, laser cut, hand drawn, and also kinetic. This one was an exhibition that is also closed now because of the quarantine, which was interesting. And I'm very much interested in creating these hybrids of media and overlays. Here, for example, with sculptures, with dinosaur bones in the Museum of Mongolian Dinosaurs like 2 years ago. So I think there's a lot of potential in the moving image, and also a lot of potential in finding new projection surfaces, not only objects, but really like more atmospheric ones, like here, water fountains, like laser drawings in the desert, like projections on nature, on moving water surfaces, on fog, on all these things that are part of our environment and can be highlighted due to a projection. I think I'm quite skipping through everything, because usually I like to have a break in between with presenting a movie, which doesn't really work, I guess. So the other way I'm trying to present works is in curating screenings and exhibitions and contributing to books, because as Stefan said, experimental films are something quite rare these days, and show them and to teach and to put them into an historic and different kind of contexts that are necessary for an audience. So I don't know. I'm just jumping out of my presentation for a moment. Are you still there, Stefan?
Yes, I'm listening.
I would say I'm because we are on the Touchdesigner. We have maybe a Touchdesigner audience. I want to show a project I specifically did in Touchdesigner, but sorry, this I think I will mute it and it. I don't know. I will keep it that way, and it's not muted. Sorry for that. So my way of working with touch is usually I'm using it more for improvisation and for trying to create tools, having a MIDI controller, having maybe a Wacom input or something, and try to create these very spontaneous, very fractured visual vignettes. And because I'm not kind of technically too skilled to bring that all into something that is functioning within Touchdesigner, I bring these sequences and then arrange them to something that is more related to a movie and has a different structure than a Touchdesigner patch that potentially can run infinitely. And that's also kind of the case for most of the things I like to do and I'm interested in, that an idea is constantly in flux, but as an artist, I prefer to choose something final in the end. I don't want to have a generative patch running all over in an exhibition and looking differently, but I prefer to have something that is dedicatedly captured and can be reproduced, because in the end the situation and the installation and the moments are never the same. So I feel that if the visual is strong, it also can hold up in being repeated and being something that is not completely random. And I also want to show a little sneak into one project that isn't released online because I'm still waiting for some festivals to pick it up. So this is also something I created partly with the help of Touchdesigner, and I don't know why it killed my video player, but anyway, it's something that is based on an installation, and in the installation version it's running very, very slow, so it's barely visible to be a movie. So potentially you can enter an exhibition, take a look at the work, think, oh, that's something static, but maybe a projection, and then you walk through the exhibition and come back some minutes later and you have a completely new painting, or motion painting as I call them. So yeah, I think in that sense, the recent years of computers and especially graphics cards becoming more powerful, it's an interesting shift in a lot of people's way of working and thinking, because we all used to work on something, render it for a long time and then coming back. And these days, a lot of things can happen in real time, which is great because you can come up with things that are almost impossible in this kind of old school rendering process. But at the same time, it's very strange because you limit yourself to keep it in a, maybe not real time, but at least in a proper speed. So you're giving away a lot of things that grow when you really think and process stuff. So yeah, I'm very much interested in these shifts in technology and reception of art. So yeah, I'm I think I will maybe open up for questions to maybe ask something more specific, especially because yeah, I don't know what's the audience today, so I don't um, drive away people that are more into something technical, and I'm maybe not the right person for that, but maybe something we both can agree on will come up with that. So yeah, as said, this is the high-speed version of the slow motion paintings. Hopefully it will be released this year. I don't know. It truly depends on more things than I can control. And yeah, that was even the old date. Maybe you can catch me, Stefan, and maybe guide me a bit what happens now.
I'm happy to jump in. Maybe I can use my privilege to ask you for a few questions before we turn to the audience. Yeah, something you said, I mean, that I also always feel like it's very nice to be able to do all those things in real time. And I mean, I would find myself more on the side of I like to create something that goes on and goes on. But maybe that's also a bit laziness, because what I find very difficult with this real-time workflow is to really nail it at some point, you know, because you can always continue, you can always turn the parameter, and it's not going to be a worse art piece, it's going to be a different art piece, and then you can do it again, and you can do it again. Where do you actually make the point where you say, but this is the artwork, and like all the other 150 possibilities before, and the other virtual millions of possibilities that I would still have if I wouldn't stop now, you know, that I find that very challenging, especially in working with Touchdesigner, just to say that's it. Do you have how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that urge as well to try to maybe find another thing and a better composition and something that looks more closer to the original. But I feel because the images, and mostly, of course, it's images that I refer to, we create, they stream or run or flow by very quickly. So we rarely take the chance when working in real time to reflect on the things we've been doing. So by capturing it's not performances I do in front of an audience, it's kind of a performance for myself.
Like a studio.
Yeah, just to capture stuff. You record something, you have your controller, you have your materials, you change your setup, you import different things, and then you have some days off, or sometimes even months, and then you take this material and see what still triggers your attention. And that's of course just not the thing Touchdesigner and all these real-time tools were intended for, but I find it very inspiring because you generate a lot of material, almost like in a where you also shoot for several days, and then there's an editor that takes the best things and puts it into something kind of an archive of these situations. And I feel that's something that Touchdesigner and I don't know, Unreal and Unity and all these things have as a potential. And I'm not sure if a lot of people use it that way, because we are fascinated by the fact that it can run real time, that it can have infinite variations of itself. But I coming from doing a drawing, doing some 3D rendering over months, I like to select something and to say, oh, this color is the version that I want to settle and live for the next, I don't know, until the next virus kills us all.
Well, this, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. That is a sensible workflow. I mean, that reminds me very much of how you would work as a musician, like you, live musician. You go into studio jam, you record lots of material, and then afterwards you revisit it again. That's something that I don't do enough. But I mean, this question of selecting an artist as a selector, that comes up more and more in recent discussions when AI and machine learning comes in, right? Where people say, well, I really appreciate the AI to do all this stuff to my images, and then, but I'm, as an artist, more the curator who says, well, that was a good one, that was not interesting, and so on. Did you ever feel seduced to have machines working for you?
You know, I mean, I'm using tools that are kind of impossible to do. Even kind of the simplest way to correct colors in Touchdesigner, it's impossible in any other way to do in real time in that precision. So I think our work on all levels is shaped by these possibilities. But I don't know, it's, I wish there would be kind of an, yeah, or not, maybe phrases others. I really appreciate that you organize these meetings and people have the chance to talk about these issues, because usually in the art world or in the festival world, these are things that are not part of the discourse. They are kind of something kind of secondary. It's more about kind of the concept and the idea and not the process of creating something. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a bit the luxury that we have to talk about it as from all sides. I mean, because there's always more sides to it than just the surface that is the product, maybe. But as you said, maybe people and meeting, maybe that's a good time to bring in some more people. So I'll get in Wieland and Carlos from the communities. Oops, and also Markus, because as we said before, this is like an alumni meeting, so maybe Markus has also some interesting questions for you.
So from YouTube, no questions sadly right now, but again, lots of praise. Just gonna quote them. Environment as a surface equals inspiring by Nafis, and E68 just states very nice abstraction way. And Peter Kern again is very happy to see your face.
Yes, I'm happy to hear that it's not all that awful.
Well, you wouldn't be here if it would be all that awful.
I don't know, I could be rich.
There's one reason why my face is not visible.
And Carlos, what do people say on Twitch?
For now, nothing.
Yeah.
They're just saying hi, Markus.
Yeah, so we don't have any questions from the audience, I think, because well, it's a bit easier to ask a one-sentence technical question in the YouTube chat than to start a real discussion about art.
Maybe, yeah, but it's always good to show stuff and to push away. But maybe Markus has a question.
It's actually more of a note. A lot of the feedback we get from you, Robert, is very, very detailed and very helpful in that way, because you're very precise in what you want to do, and you catch a lot of things that has to do with colors. It's very, very nice to get that kind of a artistic eye when using Touchdesigner, basically, because you have a totally different look at it than what comes out otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you. And also thank you for being so patient with me, because I'm torturing Markus for some years now. So maybe it's even our 10th anniversary of torturing Markus.
Well, funny side story, because we know each other for quite a while. I was actually still in Ilmenau, studying in Ilmenau and doing the internship here at Derivative when you, Robert, wrote an article about Touch
True.
Mixer 15 or something in the production, what was it called?
Digital production. Yeah.
Digital production, yeah. So quite a long relationship, basically.
Yeah.
Also for yourself with the software, because it's been a while.
Yeah, maybe something I'm interested in. I mean, we talked about, well, there's a fascination in abstract movies and so on, but they're also notoriously hard to sell and hard to find an audience. Did you ever feel like, okay, now I'm just gonna hire a model, I'm gonna shoot footage with people, with actors, with dancers, and I'm gonna take that layer in? Or was that just never a thought that we were interested in?
I mean, I worked on some projects with more kind of people in a performance. I also worked for a theater improvisation this year. There's always little bits and pieces, but the thing I found more interesting to my practice is that with these installations, with these projections on smoke and water, it's possible to put the things that I've been doing as a film and now show it in reality, and not just on a flat screen or maybe a building, but really as a three-dimensional experience. And that's something I find more exciting, because people, when they walk through it, for example, last year, this one festival we created like a lot of smoke. You couldn't see anything. You just had some parts of the projection and sound and water and these big kind of layers of clouds. And people became part of this kind of artwork in a sense. So in that way, I incorporate the human body, but not as or rarely as a direct source, I guess. And I also think it's really hard to do something interesting with people, because we are used to see performances and motion design and perfect Hollywood effects, where you have kind of super complex tracking shots and new compositing layer over new compositing layer, creating something perfect. And I feel that doing a lot of things on my own, I rather stick to the thing I'm good at, I guess.
It sounds almost like it would be interesting to think about taking parts of that work into VR. Like, because you seem to be quite excited about being immersive.
Yeah, I've been doing a small AR project like 1.5 years ago, but I feel it's quite complicated in finding anyone funding an abstract VR project. It's always games, it's always architecture, and of course there are a lot of artists doing work there, but I don't know. It's often already very time consuming to work with the museum and to get an installation running, and then being the person that also takes care of the computer and the headset and the setup and everything. You become just kind of I don't know. I would love, but not. I think not this wave of VR
right now.
probably.
Okay, Robert.
Or maybe we all go to VR because of the virus, and that's the only way to get some three-dimensional feedback.
Well, let's not hope for that. Robert, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me
It's great
and
to see.
for organizing that.
That Carlos has a question.
There is one new question here.
Yay.
So, from Jared Smith, hey Robert, are your works generated completely in a single pass using Touchdesigner, or more often you render layers and compose it after? What codec are you using to render to?
Which codec?
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's never kind of only Touchdesigner in the end. Because a lot of things need to be like color grading and composing layers together, so the touch material is raw but kind of then re-put and rearranged. And capturing is also one of these things that is I would say an art form, because I hated to capture MP4s or H.264s because they crash a lot of details and degrade the color space. So my preferred method has been using fraps, which captures at least uncompressed or compressed but non-lossless. That's the way to phrase it. And in that sense, I try to keep the pristine details and colors that Touch creates and not use a degraded version in a fancy real-time codec shit.
Okay, I think the time is up. Robert, thank you very much. It was great to have you here as well.
Thank you.
Hopefully we make it after the virus with a beer.
Hopefully we all make it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then I'm gonna move you back to the audience.
One question, if we got this short moment, because the question arrived in the chat of the stream for you, Stefan. Maybe a short rundown of the setup we are currently using to make this roundtable happen.
Oh, yeah, well, we're using an evaluation version of Samba Live, which is a video conferencing software that runs in the browser. It's been quite nice so far. And we have the guests here in this setup, and then we do a screen capture over to OBS, Open Broadcast Studio. And from there, the stream goes on to Restream.io. And from there to YouTube and Twitch. This looks like something like that. So here's the Restream. That's quite nice. We can have a stream to different setups, also to Facebook and so on. But in this case, it would only be a private Facebook channel, so I didn't do it. With the paid version, obviously, you can stream whatever and everywhere. So that's pretty much the setup. No, I'm kind of lost in all my screens. Okay, here, we're back. Yeah, does that answer the question, Wieland? Okay, now I feel a bit alone. Anyway, now it's time for our next audiovisual piece. This is also coming from Robert Seidel and it's called Vitreous. Ich sag mal, Film ab. And now we're back with Davide Santini from Italy.
Hi everyone.
How is it going? From where in Italy are you coming right now?
Milan.
Milan?
Really close to Milan, yeah.
And how's the situation in Milan?
Not very happy. Sadly, we've just passed 8,000 deaths because of the virus, and everyone is locked in. But we're trying to do our best and keep going on.
Well, let's keep going.
Yep.
Maybe interesting for our users. I said before, Davide has written a book. I'm gonna show it quickly.
Yeah, of course.
It's a book about Touchdesigner shortcuts and hotkeys, and you can buy it on Amazon. Can you say something about this?
Yeah, it's basically a quick reference guide which comprehends all of the shortcuts and hotkeys Touchdesigner related. I had to scavenge through file systems and all the resources available because I couldn't find one complete list of them all. And you can find it both in a digital version, Kindle version, I think, and paperback from Amazon all over the world. You just need to search for Touchdesigner on your local Amazon, and you should be able to find it without any problem.
Well, very cool. Thank you very much for all of that work. I'm sure lots of people appreciate it, especially to have a printed version. But today you wanted to talk to the community about another project that you've been working on.
New project, yeah. The idea is to create an interface in Touchdesigner and then automatically move it in a browser so that you can control your Touchdesigner project bidirectionally from the interface on Touchdesigner or from your web browser interface.
That's a very interesting project or idea that lots of people have had to deal with. I was myself in a project where we wanted to control Touchdesigner from the outside, from iPads, and bidirectional. It was everything but simple.
The other option would be to build a custom app application, or maybe use OSC, Touch OSC, or something like that to transmit your signals and then manage them inside of Touchdesigner. But this December, I had a client that asked me for a control system for like a media player interface. And I started working on it knowing nothing about HTML, WebSockets, Node.js, JavaScript. I didn't know absolutely anything about web protocols, but I started using them. And the first step was building a system that was working only for that project, and it was based on JavaScript. But then, luckily, in January, there was this new Touchdesigner version update, which included the web server that. And so I decided to completely rebuild it, always knowing nothing of WebSockets, etc. And so I restarted from scratch, and with a little help from a friend of mine, Tommaso Alfonsi, which is an informatic engineer, graduating these days. And he taught me something about web protocols, and then I integrated all of it in Touchdesigner. Now we have working talks, which I show you in a minute. And the idea is to make it available to the public in a couple of months after I've tested it properly. And I probably have I'll try to organize with Andrew Quinn a workshop here in Milan, so that we can present these and a couple of other things. Probably it will be a 2 days workshop as soon as this virus thing ends. And then it will be publicly available on the forum or on the assets of the community, so everyone can build his own system. I hope so. I can maybe share my screen now.
Looking forward. Maybe one more question. So it runs in the web server that in Touchdesigner. Is that what
now the only thing you need is Touchdesigner. You don't need to install node.js. You don't need to install any external program.
Super. Yeah. Show us. Sounds exciting.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Screen one. Oh, okay. Okay, so I've built an example patch just to show how you can use these web UI talks I built. It's a very simple patch, just for showing how everything works. Classical TD banana. We can change with a ready button. We have a couple of controls just for testing. And the patch is just a switch between inputs, HSV adjustment, transform, tile, and this just manages the selects the interface from this container. These are just regular widgets. I've done absolutely nothing to them. It's just change the name. And all you have to do to create this web interface is drag and drop these blocks wherever you want inside your project. I can drop it here, but you can drop it inside here. You can drop it here, or maybe here. It's not a problem. This will automatically detect all of your widgets. And if we open a new browser window, okay. This is the talks I just dragged in, and you can see it tells us what IP address is my machine on. So I just have to copy this, paste it here. Port is 9980, but you can change it if you want, no problem. So just 9980. And this is this interface replicated here, and it works. You can also do it bidirectionally, so you can see that the interface on the browser changes. You can also use sliders, and it's almost real time. There's like a couple of milliseconds of delay. Of course, this interface looks ugly because it's just plain HTML, but you can build the custom pages. The idea is that you have your default automatically generated HTML file, which you can see here. And you just copy, paste it. You can paste it in an editor that you want, and then customize it. And then you just paste your customized code, HTML code, in here. I've already built this, so it's just a HTML page. Basically, I just added this style section, copy and paste from another project. And then if you enable the use custom HTML, the project will use your custom HTML file instead of the automatically generated one. And then if we reset the clients, this is the very simple but custom interface I built for this project. So you can customize it as you want. What's interesting is that you can also have a multi-client setup. So, for example, I could open the same address on my or on anything that has a browser, basically. So I can show you. I just go to I just put in the same address, which is 192.168.128.99.80. And here I have the same interface, and it has the one on the computer, both from Touchdesigner and from the other web app. And I can also control Touchdesigner from here. So maybe change the input. as long as your firewall doesn't prevent you from connecting, you can do this also from outside your local network. Should be no problem. You can use how many you want. I already took care of a couple of issues. One was having multiple IP on the same machine, because maybe your PC is connected both to your LAN network and to your wireless network. So if that's the case, you would have more addresses here, listed here, and then you could enable this one. This would be enabled if it detects more than one address. And with a slider, you can choose what address to use. I also added a couple of useful pulse button. One is to reset the whole web server. One is to refresh the clients. So just refreshes the page on all of the clients connected. And then there's this toggle that changes between the custom and the automatically generated thing. And it automatically detects if you change something. So for example, let's say we add a button. Maybe we want to add a flip Z. So we just add it here. And this should, detect it. And if we delete this one, should already go out. You can do this with any user interface setup you have. You don't need to have everything in the same container or base. You can just have a slider here, a button here, all over your project, and this will automatically detect everything. At the moment, I added support for buttons, momentary and toggle and wherever, radio buttons with all orientation, so horizontal, vertical, left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to top, and all of the other options, and sliders, both vertical and horizontal sliders. I think the next step will be to add support for another couple of commonly used widgets. I have also to take care of a couple of bugs. For example, I noticed that if I have some component with the same exact name, so maybe slider hue here and another slider hue here, there can be some conflict with it. I already have an idea on how to fix it, but I have to test it properly to see if it actually works. And then it's already in the testing phase. So I just have to take care of all the bugs that will occur and try to fix them as well as I can. And also there's some optimization to be done, even if at the moment it's not that heavy. It's like 0.2 milliseconds only on the CPU. But I think I can lower it a little bit because there's a couple of things that I think I can do that better, especially from the Python point of view. And if you want, I can show you a little bit the of this web UI I built. I try to keep it quite organized. Maybe I can go full screen so you can see it better. So I try to keep it well organized. There's these 4 containers. This is the one that takes care of the communication from and to the web server. So this is the web server that, where there's the port selection, the refresh thing, and all of that. And this is the code I had to implement in it. nothing too complicated. It's just select the HTML file I'm using, a couple of checking things and triggering a trigger. And then this is on the WebSocket receive text is what happens when we receive a message from the browser. So we basically register it here, and then we post-process it a little bit. This is the IP section. This is a little script that detects all of your IP addresses and puts them in a nice layout. So this is just the web server is just the web server, actually, that communication. And then here we have the building of the HTML page. So here we detect all of the widgets we have in our project. There's a couple of things. This is the test I was doing for duplicate names, for removing duplicate names. And then we have all the sections we are considering. So buttons, sliders, and radio buttons at the moment. This is just merging and ordering and substituting a couple of things. This is the custom, where your custom HTML file will go. And this is where all the default things are. So how a radio button will look by default is just this string. How slider maybe, how the slider will look. And if you want, you can customize this. So then your automatically generated page will be already with your custom option, but maybe it's, I don't know, I prefer to have it in a separate place so that it's more ordered and I can debug it easier. This is just the header of the HTML page. So yeah, this component takes care of building the HTML page. And this is the communication from from Touchdesigner to the server. So we have buttons, sliders, and radios duplicated for the number of times that it finds a button, slider, radio. Nothing too complicated, just a bit of scripting and taking care of what we are working with. So a couple of Python expressions and a couple of executions. And this is the WebSocket part. I decided to base it on, because I tried a couple of other protocols, but this was, to me, the simplest and the most reliable one, also with the lowest latency. So I think this is a good option for working on a browser, because other protocols, for example, OSC has had lots of issues with the latency and consistency of the transmissions. So if you had to send maybe more than a couple of controls at the same time, or in a very small amount of time, then it had some problems. And this takes care of all the reception of the messages from your browser. So I can maybe show you that when you click something, this select node, the latest message it receives, and then we are directing it to the right position with a couple of scripts, and we are transmitting this kind of data. We can see them in the web console. So these are the data that we receive. So it's also quite useful if you need to debug it. I try to keep it simple. I think that's it. Now I'm in the beta phase. I call it beta because we are in the testing phase. Me and a company from Milan who are creative, which I was working with when I started this project. They were the original client that asked me for a custom implementation, and then I try to build a more universal version that can work well with any kind of integration. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think we're very excited in anticipation of the publication of this tool, and I'm also very curious what Wieland's going to say about it, because I know when the web server that came up, he was like getting all excited, saying, "Well, this is the future of interfaces in Touch," and you're doing it here. So I'm gonna get the guys move them to speakers, Carlos and Wieland.
Okay.
And let's see what the what questions the audience has.
Yeah, so from YouTube, Isabel from Derivative was very adamant to say hello to you, Davide. I think she said 2 times hello. So hello from Isabel.
Hello,
from
Isabel.
Canada. And we have 3 questions actually. So E86 is asking if it is possible to put an OP viewer in the web browser.
Actually, I've not tried that yet. I've tried to start from the simplest widgets, so from buttons, and then now I'm trying to step up. But theoretically, yes, you can do that, because all you need to do is find out how to place it in an HTML page. But you can send messages, any kind of message you want. I've also seen a couple of examples where people were posting pictures through WebSockets. So it should be you should be able to do that. I've not done that yet. I would try to do some experiments with the more complex widgets and components in the next few weeks.
Okay, and we got 2 questions by Nafis, and I'm just going to just quote the question here one by one. If this were to be hosted on a public hosting, how much bandwidth would a setup like yours handle? As in, how many devices could you connect and communicate simultaneously?
Well, how many devices? I don't have a really clear answer to give you. I think, well, it's not a heavy transmission protocol, because all you're transmitting is kind of strings. Because if you look at this, it's just if you press a button, you just send and receive a single line message. So shouldn't be too heavy on the network. And basically it would depend on how your network infrastructure will handle this kind of messages, probably. But there should not be any hard constraint from Touchdesigner, basically.
So I'm just going to chime in for a short moment, because we had the topic of web server debt at the last roundtable in Berlin also. And one of the basic ideas we all shared there was that the web server debt should basically never be used to host something public, at least on the World Wide Web. If this was the questions from you, Nafis, yeah. But Nafis also asked another question, and of course, this question was inbound. Is there a GitHub or something like that where the users could try out the beta system you
Not
just showed
yet.
us?
At the moment, is a closed beta, let's say. I've given it to a couple of trusted testers, and when we will publish it, probably we can also have it on a GitHub so that you can improve it and run all of your tests as you want. So yes, that's probably gonna happen. It's not a problem for. I have nothing against it. Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe you can share your GitHub links so people who are interested in can check it out daily in hope of some new updates.
Yeah, I don't have a personal GitHub yet because I've never done this kind of project. But you can check my website, which is I can post it maybe on Twitch.
Your website is blended in the stream.
Okay.
Deltacut.it.
Yep, exactly.
And I'm also pretty sure Isabel will just ask you to also post it in the community section of the Derivative website.
Of course, yeah.
She wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Carlos, do you have questions on Twitch?
There are a couple of questions here on Twitch and also a suggestion. So first I'm going to read the questions and then the suggestion. So the first question is, can you exclude UI elements from showing up on the web page?
Well, yes, you can do that. At the moment, you can do that manually. I can share my screen maybe again and show you how. Screen share, here it is, screen. Okay, so just look at this. In the HTML builder, actually, this is the list of all the widgets we are detecting. So you can just put a select in here. It just filter out what you do. Should be like a button radio. So it doesn't appear here, and it should not be on the. Probably yes. I have to take care of a couple of things, but it's a thing I definitely want to implement. Automatized way, or maybe just already having this one, this select here, and then you could just type in wherever you don't want.
Can I make a proposition?
Yeah, of course.
To maybe use the tag system, because in the OP find you can basically already filter operators by tags and maybe ignore certain operators with a certain tag. So
I started with the tagging widgets, but then for every widget you create, you have to actually. Oh, something broke here. You have to actually tag it. So, for example, if you have a pre-built system, you would have to go through every one of them, like going on your all of your sliders, customizing component, and adding your tag in here. But if you are building a new system, okay, could be easily done. But maybe you have an already built system and you just want to implement this web browser interface, and then you would need to go through all of your widgets. So I don't know if the tagging is the best option to do this.
I was more thinking about ignoring the component, the widgets without with a tag. So just adding like an ignore tag to the parts you don't want to see.
Yeah, that could be done. Maybe add a custom page in these parameters, like filters, and you can filter out buttons, for example, or radio buttons, or whatever you don't want. Yeah, all ideas are welcome, because I'm still improving it. So feel free to submit you can also write to me if you want. Just on the website there's all the contacts, and also Instagram, Facebook, it's always Deltacut. So you can find me anywhere and just suggestions or questions or anything you want.
So there is another question. Is it possible to have different IDs for each web client using this tool?
Yeah, well, you can different ID. You can build. You can have multiple user interfaces on different parts, maybe. So that could be an option. Otherwise, because you have to tell your web page what to render, so using the part is probably the easiest thing. So you can have one with 9980 and another one with 9981. Maybe a different one when you filter out something, or you use another custom HTML page, and then you just select your different part on your web browser. You have maybe 2 tabs. Yeah, that's the easiest way, probably.
Okay, we're getting a bit close with the time. Do we have more questions?
Just one suggestion, maybe? Yeah, go ahead, Bülent.
Oh yeah, no, it's just from Greg that he loves how you use procedural DATs to assemble and dissect web stuff with lots of visual feedback along the way. So lots of stuff, lots of love from Derivative again.
Thanks.
Carlos?
And here they say you don't have to use the component editor to add tags. You can select multiple operators and add them using the parameter box.
It's for the tags. If you on the right box with the parameters, there's this little pen symbol, and if you click it, you can also edit the text, so you don't have to go into the customized component.
Yeah. That's probably I probably have some more parameter exposed, so that it's easier to work with the custom parameters. I mean, with the customization of the system.
Okay, Davide, thank you very much for showing us this great tool. Guys, thank you for the questions. It's time to move to our next program point, which is again a video, and this time is coming from our next guest, which is going to be Markus Heckmann, and he works together with a Canadian artist called Matt Thibodeau, which is just released an album. It's called Reclusion. You can find it here on Bandcamp. And Markus sent us a video that he made for a song from this album. The song is called Sand and Steel. And film up. damit sind wir wieder zurück. Markus, vielen Dank für dieses schöne Video. Was viele ja auch vergessen, dass Markus nicht nur bei Derivative Technical Director ist und Troubleshooter in allen Lebenslagen, sondern er ist ja auch unter dem Label Wüstenarchitekten unterwegs, wo man viele von seinen künstlerischen Arbeiten sehen kann. Eine davon haben wir jetzt gerade gesehen. Das Album ist veröffentlicht, stehen da jetzt... oh, sorry, I switched to German. Oh yeah. The album is released. Is there now a big tour coming up, or has a big tour been cancelled?
I'm stuck in Toronto.
Markus, sorry, I didn't put up your video. Can you repeat your sound? I mean, your sound. Can you repeat what you just said?
In the old world, as of 2 weeks ago, I'm supposed to be in Hellerau right now for the hybrid, in Dresden, Hellerau, for the hybrid festival, together with Matt. In the new world, I'm in Toronto. So this is our cancellation there. Unfortunately, we were supposed to play Reclusion, the whole album, and the visual performance there. But yeah, we'll do it some other time.
Bloody hell, we would have met there, huh? We were already looking forward.
Would have been a nice, next time.
Next time.
With more beer, yeah.
Virtual beers. Markus, what can you tell us about the newest developments at the Derivative headquarters?
Well, I think first of all, I'm sure I speak for pretty much everybody at Derivative that what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's something we perhaps never expected or foreseen. It all feels a little bit surreal to all of us, I believe. Yet the outpour in the community of what you guys have been pushing out, how much you have been working on educational things, on components, etc. It's like a very, very heartfelt thank you from all of us for your for what you do, basically. And thank you very much also, Stefan, for organizing this roundtable in such a quick time, shifting it from a physical space into the virtual world. And it's amazing how fast these things can happen. And it's nice to see how many people are listening in and watching this. So it's, if you look on our website into the community section, it's really, really impressive to see how many workshops have been posted, how many tutorials and assets have been going on, how much of the workshops physical or in the real world have been moved into the virtual. This is a really, really nice showing of all the or knowledge dump, so to speak, from the community to the community. Just to keep us busy and use this time to learn things so we're ready once we are allowed to leave the house again. So, well, I mean, what have we been doing? We just released a full, or maybe I should actually share my screen, eh? That would help. Yes. Share, okay. Yeah, that's what I want to. I was basically sharing the screen already without sharing it. So I wanted to point out that if you go to our website onto the community section, the amount of assets, tutorials, and workshops that have been added is really impressive, and it keeps coming. So very, very happy about how everybody's coming together. And then we just released an official build. So what we're currently doing is we're looking what you're reporting back. We're doing bug fixes, and we are starting on the next experimental build. Hence, what I can share currently, what we've been doing is a little bit limited. Oh, I want to show you this. That's why I have it up here. Actually, if you just, it's a little trick how this video came to be, basically, is...
Markus, just shortly, I'm going to turn off your video so you've got a bit more bandwidth. I mean, your
sure.
video
Yeah,
camera.
absolutely.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah. So how this video came to be, here to create this motion as if it's like almost rotating around stuff, or not quite sure how to describe this movement in there. But what's coming in is the output of the histogram, basically. And then in a traditional feedback loop, I'm not translating the I'm not translating the 1 pixel line that's here on the left side just over time in this feedback loop. But what I'm doing instead is I'll take a noise, and the noise I created with noise chop, because here I have a little bit more control over how the noise is shaped and how I can speed of the noise, or even the behavior then of this whole feedback loop. And this is sized up to fit. And then I'm using the math chop, which comes in very handy here, to divide each pixel value by 1920 by my horizontal resolution for a displace. So what you get is basically that you have a control over the speed of your feedback per pixel, per column. And this generates this effect where you see these different speeds going across, basically. Just a little side thing. I showed that a couple times already, but I want to show you more detail of how it actually works. It's still not released, but what we're working on, or have been spending quite a bit of time on, is a new installer. And one of the things that you can do with this new installer is you can basically choose with what version you want to open up Touchdesigner. So you can install multiple Touchdesigners. And lately, what I've added in since last showing this is also the possibility to name your installers so that you can identify the builds more easily. So if I want to, for example, open up this file here with the latest experimental that I have available, this is going to open up on a different screen, but I'll move it right over. Then this is absolutely possible. And this makes basically working with multiple builds between if we're posting official things or looking at and the experimental versions. This is perhaps quite interesting here, actually, in the latest experimental that I have here. Or Eric worked quite a bit on the flex operators and added in a couple of flex tops, or one flex top, where you now have not only access to the position, but you also get, for example, density or diffuse position and anisotropy, velocity, diffuse velocity, things like this. This is more towards working more towards the possibilities of actually making or creating the shaders as you probably would have seen them on the NVIDIA Flex side. So this is something that's in the works currently. And that was just a side note. On the back to the installer, if I want to, for example, install a totally experimental build here, then I'll take you through the process. It comes up, and I get not as fancy looking installer window anymore, but that's okay. And I have two Touchdesigner installations currently. I have official. I have a 20K latest. And so the installer comes up and asks me, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to install this in parallel, or do you want to install this as a separate build? So I'm going to choose install this in parallel because I'm running this super experimental version, and gives me here the change the path, installs in the path that contains the build number. And the next step would be, okay, I have these custom install and touch player options. And if I set this, then there I have the possibility to give this whole thing a custom tag to identify it. So if I call this 2020 40K experimental and hit next, then I can watch this install. Now, the other thing is, okay, I wouldn't have done this if this would have been the old installer, where now we could have looked at this picture for 10 minutes. The new installer is quite more quick.
Can we not have have like a nice animation that we can watch while the installer is installing?
The installer engine doesn't allow for animations. This is an animation right here, basically. If that's not enough, I don't know. But it is very speedy nowadays with this, and I think I timed it at about a minute or something now, compared to the 10 minutes before. Yeah, I just see on Twitch, apparently you don't like the disk icon, Stefan. This here, floppy disk, install onto computer.
That's not me, that's not me saying that. I like
it. Okay. So once it's done, you now have the ability in your OpenWith menu now to choose between these 3 builds here that I have installed. So this is quite useful. And if you're looking at your Windows add or remove programs, then under Touchdesigner, it also identifies them correctly. So uninstalling this is very easy as well. And you won't see this. This is not my main screen currently that I'm sharing, but well, it's uninstalled now. Nice and quick. Okay. So last but not least, one thing that has been shared quite a bit recently, and it's also one of these canceled things that I thought, okay, maybe I'll just put it out while other things are in the work as well. I had been helping Robert Henke and Selma Breton. Sorry, Selma, if you're listening, I have trouble saying your last name, on their From Within project, which was supposed to show last week in Belgium, but obviously was cancelled as well. And one thing that I also built for them was a mapper, because for every use you need, like everybody needs their own MIDI mapper apparently. We have VLAN's Alpha Moonbase, the very nice Galileo mapper family. We have Bridget's, which was published by Eric Minzer to map all kinds of devices onto widgets. Comes with a great video as well. And obviously, we also have Darian Brito's TD Morph, which allows for OSC and MIDI mapping as well. So the question is, well, why does Markus need to build his own mapper? Not really sure. I started that at some point and then just didn't stop. And also it was basically training myself on the listener and trying to add in certain features that were requested by Robert and Selma. So this thing, I'm calling it the Zuweiser because it assigns values from one job to parameters. And it contains a bunch of techniques that they're more exploratory. This is not, this is me playing around literally. You have a little interface which is built with Ivan's Lister component. I always have a like a relationship with the Lister that is not quite, it's not necessarily a love-hate relationship, but sometimes I just pull hairs out of my head if there are any left, because I'm frustrated, and other times it works so beautifully with the callback system that it has. So I'm trying to use it more to get more used to it and not be too upset with it. Anyway, so this is what I built there. You have, for this supervisor, what you get basically is a couple parameters here. You set your controller source with, which for me is MIDI in shop, and we have this mapping active thing here. And this mapping active thing is a little bit funny. So if you click it, I am changing the UI colors just because I want to seem like I'm mapping parameters in Touchdesigner as like in any other software. And then I have to roll over a parameter currently, and then move my MIDI knob, and I get a bind here. Now, what I can do, so it creates in the list here, it created this, use this channel, control 75, put it onto the transform 1SX. And perhaps what I want to do is I want to use the same MIDI channel to also control SY. And I can do this. I can now move over to scale in the vertically and move my MIDI slider, and I get a little pop-up message which asks me if I want to add an, like this mapping already exists. Do I want to add this parameter to this mapping, or do I want to create a new one? So if I hit append here, what that means is that now my bind destinations for this MIDI channel are, you actually have two of them, SX and SY in here. I can remove one. That's totally possible. Right-clicking onto the bind destination, selecting it, removes it. Let's try that again here. Same channel. It asks me again, mapping exists. Do you append, or do you want a new one? And I can add a new one. And what that means is that now I have the same channel coming in twice, but going out as two different channels. So why is that useful? In this particular example, perhaps, what if I want to have a different lookup curve for these two parameters? So this is the section back here. Or I can actually, sorry, maybe I want to also change the, have a different range for both of them. So now, while they are controlled by the same MIDI knob, you have different, oops, see, that's the problem here. I got to turn this off. They have different ranges, basically. Similarly, I can change the interpolation of these so that one of them is, for example, an S-curve interpolation, the other one in linear. I also have the option to add a custom interpolation. If I right-click onto the C, I get a little pop-up where I can control my lookup curve here and switch to that. Now this parameter is controlled by this lookup curve that I have specified here. I can rename my mapping channels here actually. So call this SY. This errors, but I think it's actually correct. Ooh, oh well, okay. Well, we'll fix that later. I can also add mappings, because maybe you don't want to go this weird way that I do, that I just did here, enable mapping and then roll over a parameter. You can also right-click onto the channel column here and select the MIDI node that you want to use to map it. And then take a parameter. Let's grab this one here. drop it onto bind destination, and it adds the bind into it. You have mute, delete, and last but not least, you also have these modifiers here. So let's say my SX I want to modify with like an animation channel, for example. So now my MIDI is multiplied with this channel coming from the modifier source being specified on the MIDI mapper page here. Now, this doesn't have to be MIDI. You can basically put any chop here because it's completely chop-based. It's a fairly simple network that just does a couple things in sequence, like renaming these channels, the mute, having the hold in there, normalizing them if necessary, the lookup with the different lookup curves that you select here, and the multiply with the values coming in from the modifier, finally to the bind shop from where it binds the whole thing. So you can get to this whole thing. It's an experiment. I thought I'll just put it out there because why keep it here? You can find it on my GitHub under Wüstenarchitekten Zuweiser, and I'll keep making updates to it until there is no reason anymore to make updates, because there might be the ultimate tool eventually. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me for now, I think.
Yeah, Markus, this looks exciting. What I'm wondering a bit is, like, everybody builds these preset systems or these mapping systems, which are super useful, no doubt about that. But I work a lot with the animation editor, and each time I have to think, like, this could be such a cool tool if there would be just some changes to it. Like, if you compare it to other timelines, the distance is not that far, but there are so many things that make working with it really hard in comparison to, like, Châtaigne, what we saw recently. But my impression is it can't be so difficult to make it work, because basically everything is already there. It's just usability-wise 10 years back.
Yeah, perhaps. This is a general effort in the whole UI is to try to update every piece in it. I think we mentioned this when we were in Berlin last. And this is perhaps a little bit a process that's ongoing. I don't think the pieces will be coming online one by one, but rather as a new set of tools that's complete. And then the animation editor is one of those things that we'll see an update into the now time.
Looking forward to that. I would get the other guys into the speakers corner now to open up for questions from the audience. So here comes Wieland, here comes Carlos. No, this is Tom and Davide, Carlos. So now I'm just moving everybody into the speakers corner. Let's see if we survive that.
It's a big
question time.
So from YouTube, there are actually no questions. But from me are two remarks, or one remark and one question. The first one is, I totally feel your pain with the lister. It's, I'm always working with it and nagging Ivan about it. But especially the documentation on the wiki got updated, and I'm very happy about it because there's some new functions. So my question is, you changed the background of the parameter window. How did you do that?
Well, that's easy. So if you let me open this up here. just gotta pull that window over 1 second. There's this whole UI colors thing. So if you look up UI colors, it's basically a large dictionary full with colors that define all the colors in the user interface. Now you got to find the right colors for whatever you're doing, but once you have those, let's go here. UI.colors. How's that? For I in UI colors debug I or something. Oh, that takes a while apparently. Why is that? Anyway, oh yeah, there we go. So you have a ton of these color definitions here, and you have to find the right colors for every piece of the UI, but you can set them, and I store them and revert the whole thing after. So yeah, fairly simple.
Okay, and we got another question from E86. Just reverted it, but the question is it possible to switch between external modulation of the parameter and MIDI controlled parameter in a simple way?
Well, theoretically, yes, because I'm just referencing the source. I'm just referencing the source as a parameter here. So this source could be anything. This source could be a null chop, and I could have a second input with all the channels here and a switch or whatever. And by switching now, you now would have control over all these channels via this constant chop. So I think that's what was asked.
I suppose so, yes.
Yeah, that's totally possible. Yeah, the other way would be via the modifiers as well, theoretically. Yeah.
So yeah. Oh yes, great. Thanks from E86.
Good. I think there's one question about the binding it. So I'm using in the parameters, it's using a reference to the bind chop. Why doesn't that work the other way around? Yeah, because I'm using a bind chop here. I'm not, this is basically the only direction this works. I cannot go the other way around. So true, if I delete this thing, these things will go into error.
Just asking for myself again, when using the bind chop, is it possible to also send the bind out chop into a MIDI out, and this way send out MIDI information from the parameters?
So what you would want to do is script that whole thing, because the bind chop has a callback, which is with the callback on value change, which gives you the bind up channel value previous and the source. So where is that change coming from? Is that coming from the input or from the reference? This way you can distinguish between if you want to send this back into a MIDI out, for example, or if this change is coming from the input to the bind chop, so don't act on it. So if you script it this way, you can send it out back to the source. You have to know your source, basically. Yeah.
Know your source.
I don't know. I would be careful with this because these values are changing constantly. So just sending it back out would probably result in not the way to do this. You would want to send back values when you change them locally and locally only. So via the scripting is the right approach here, via the callback.
So Markus here in Twitch, they have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
The chop execute instead of bind chop to get it the other way around?
Sure, you could perhaps script this everything with sure. Yes, we could use an execute for that as well, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing in the Galileo mapper family. There, everything is based on setting the values via scripting only. So
Right.
it's totally
Yeah.
possible. Just
Yeah.
The other one is so you can use a MIDI input channel to fade up the amount of modifier animation?
Yeah, so this is a simple multiply. So I just have to find, oh, right, switch back to MIDI here. So yeah, this is literally a very simple, why is this not going? Oh, I clicked something on this device here. Now everything is funny. Uh-oh. Okay. Control 115. We can switch the input here fairly easily. Channel 1, control 115. There it is. Okay. So, sorry, I am trying. Oh, here, yes, exactly. So if my MIDI is all the way on, then I have my modifier channel here coming in my animation, basically. And now I can control the modifier with my MIDI. The idea there was basically that certain control values came from Ableton directly, and those were animation curves, essentially, and a hardware device that then added control over these, on top of that, controlling the animation curves. Yeah.
Can I pitch in with like a general interest question?
Sure.
I think, would it be possible to run Cables in the web server dot and control Touchdesigner from Cables interface?
Oh, you mean like this here?
Okay, you already did it.
I did have a little bit trouble logging in, and I do have I have some issues here controlling it with my mouse, but it did work earlier. You see it running basically. I'm not sure why I currently cannot control it, but
Interesting.
This is the web server component here.
Maybe you should put Tom and you in a breakout room. You figure this out.
Yeah, I might just have to debug a little bit the scripts that run the web browser component with, because that did work earlier. There, it's just super delayed. Yeah, look at that. Now it's doing stuff. I don't know. But anyway, it does work, yeah.
Okay.
So Tom, the challenge is on you now. Can you run Touchdesigner in Cables?
That's awesome. Is that a Chrome?
This is using Chromium, yeah.
So, me here from Wieland. How is Rabbit Control going? Last time you were in Berlin, you had this hackathon. So, Rabbit Control.
Well, the state of Rabbit Control is a state that it's in process. Oh, look at this. It's the third file. I'm working on it actively. It's a little bit involved because of all the different applications talking to not just Touchdesigner to Touchdesigner or Touchdesigner to the web and back, but basically also trying to talk properly to V4, trying to talk to open frameworks and things like this. So there's a couple people involved in, and I'm sometimes running into a couple issues where it's not quite sure, okay, from which side now has the issue. Mainly what I've been focusing on there is the ability to update. I'll show you very quickly if we still have some time.
We still have a bit of time.
Sorry?
We still have a bit of time, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to open up.
Okay, while it's loading, I'm just gonna put in another question from Manuel Mitash, and the question is, how do you capture the click on a parameter to create a new mapping?
Right, so it's not click. It's that's why I don't really like it very much. What I'm doing here, it's the UI dot what is it called? Somewhere here, UI dot rollover par. So you basically get the last or the parameter that you're currently rolling over. Hence, if you're trying to map and you're running Ableton on the same machine, this is not going to be possible because your mouse cursor cannot be in two places. So either you roll over your Touchdesigner parameter or you're in Ableton trying to wiggle something. So you have to stay with your mouse over the parameter during mapping and then wiggle a MIDI control from a hardware device or from another computer. And then watch out that you're not accidentally mapping other parameters that you didn't want to map. So it's UI.rolloverPar. There's an RFE for last clicked or something, where we can find out what has been last clicked in the UI, but that's only an RFE so far.
Markus, there's another question here. Any plans for a curve shop with a manual Photoshop like Bezier Curve UI?
Perhaps more the perhaps more not a curve shop with a UI currently, but we would have to build like a nice Photoshop UI for it, which shouldn't be too hard. Somebody's just got to do it. Problematic. But yeah, I mean, the interface, if you look at nodes in general, it's funny that there is this divide in operators, or not a divide, but some operators are more interactive than others, basically. The interaction in a 3D operator, for example, it's basically asking, oh, why can I not move stuff in here? In chops, you have, why don't I have handles in chops? While there is almost, do we still have that here? No, what's scope tools? Oh yeah, well, there is like more interaction basically on these chop operators. So it's I know that's been always something that Greg really would like to see, is to have options to control things visually as well. But I don't see this in the immediate future, but I could be wrong. Sometimes things just happen. So yeah, so basically what I've got here is my little RCP server. So just for everybody who doesn't know, the RCP thing is something that came out of the V4 universe. And let me just find the rabbit control. There we are. And it's a very limited, it's a very extensive protocol to communicate via any network protocol between applications and send parameters or data in general from one application to the other. It's a very well nicely defined protocol, I find. And it works very similar to what we saw earlier. You have a single node. For this one here, you have to specify the parameters that you want to communicate across. So here, for example, I have 2 pages, custom and test page. One is a text parameter, the other one a float. And you have one operator, which can be server or client. And activating the server, setting a port, I now can go here to this web client and look at 2 pages, custom and test page, and then here are my parameters, and now I have control bidirectionally between these two applications here. You can do this with more, like if I clone this tab and maybe let me just tile this here. Okay. So I can have multiple clients here, and they do update, and I can change, like, basically, yeah, same as what we saw before. What I'm currently mostly working on is that I can send updates for parameters. So for example, here I have my parameter, which is called float371. And maybe I want to change this label and I want to call it superfloat. And so now it changed it here, but it also changed the name across all applications. And this is where I'm sometimes running a little bit of trouble. Especially what happened before was that if I change names, that it would create more of these parameters, as just happened here. Like now I have 2 of each, which I definitely didn't plan on doing. So those are these things that I'm kind of working on and working with Ingo as well, and trying to debug what's going wrong. It's a fairly deep undertaking, but I hope that we'll have something fairly soon.
Thank you a lot, Markus.
Yeah, I think if you don't have any more questions, do we have more questions? No.
So YouTube is really quiet right now. The only thing, if
it's getting late for YouTubers, they all have to go to bed.
So what about the Twitchers, Carlos?
New, more than the curve chop one.
And that's for the weather. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, so then let me take this opportunity.
I'm sorry, because this was the question if there's anything new on the Twitch, because I have one announcement from Isabel, and she is very, very eager for me to say it. Community is doing streams, tutorials, live tutorials, something like this, community meetups online. Please, really, really pretty please, send a message to Isabel on Facebook, or just send an email, maybe on the at Derivative, and she will take care that everyone in the community knows about the meetup, the situation, the event online. So yeah, all the support from Derivative for what we and you in the future are doing.
Well, thank you, Isabel, for that. I hope I told you about it before. I'm not sure. Let's see. Well, thank all of you for coming. and for spending all this time with us. I know it's been long. I would be interested in some feedback afterwards if you think this has been too much or not enough. Yeah, that would be very interesting. And also I have a little announcement to make. I mean, this is really not finished at all, but I'd like to mention it. We had the Node Institute. We are working finally on our webpage. And this webpage is supposed to be a learning platform for node-based software, mainly V4 and Touchdesigner. Like we've been doing these classes here in our classroom, but obviously not everybody can come to Berlin. Now people can't even get out of their own house. So the idea was there for a long time to move this online, but there were projects. Now we don't have projects anymore, so we can focus on the learning platform. And the idea is that we basically create this platform where you can sell digital goods, where you can sell webinars, and where you can sell full courses. And our intention is not only to use that for ourselves, but we want to build it in a way that we can invite teachers, that we also open this maybe up to other software. So Cables is also node-based, so it would be very welcome. And as soon as we're ready, we're gonna post this, and we're gonna invite the whole community to start adding content there. And while it's nice that there's so much free stuff in the community, there's also this whole level of people trying to make a living. And so our focus will be less on the, let's put lots of free stuff out there from the community. It's great. This stuff happens on the Derivative website and lots of others, but we want to focus on actually helping people to spend time to create this education content and actually get paid for it. It's not going to be a money-making machine, but that's a bit our hope, that we can bring these two sides together, the professional work and the education, and deliver that on a quality. And I'm going to give you a tiny preview on our future website, which is a mess in WordPress right now. It's going to be looking something like that. You're going to be learning VVV and Touchdesigner, and more on that when we're ready. We're working high pressure, obviously, because we've got nothing else to do. And we're looking very much forward to use this fucking virus break to go ahead with this one, which didn't happen before. So this is the last announcement to finish this session off, for which I thank everybody for coming. We will watch a last video by Robert Seidel, and I hope to see you in 1 month for the next Touchdesigner Roundtable. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Und
goodbye.
Goodbye.
Film ab.
Thank you.
I find no peace in functionality.